Good morning, Mr. Chair, and we appreciate your coming. Everybody's been invited, but the busy beavers are here, and we don't want to take your time unnecessarily. So we would ask you to get started, and welcome to Senate Finance for the hearing on this very important bill, Senate Bill 528, Climate Solutions Now, Act of 222.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to try to focus on the areas of the bill that sort of overlap and have a gray area with finance and education, health, and environment. I'm going to very quickly go through the other elements of the bill, but 3/4 of the bill, Madam Chair, were in the bill last year, so we're fairly familiar with that. We're going to go through these pretty quickly. These, I don't have to show you flooding across our state in the last few years. I mean, we know that. This is a pretty interesting slide. This is from NASA. It shows a chart of the increase in temperatures across the country or the world, and I guess the country, and from post-industrial time to now, and from 1950 up, it's a pretty clear line. Next. This is the cost of flooding. They're projecting $8 billion with a B by 2050, and that's only if we follow the recommendations of the climate summit. So if we don't follow those, it could be more than $8 billion. It could be 10, 12, or 13 billion. Next. You know, some other facts about flooding and glaciers. Okay, let me get to the bill. The first two sections are very close to what was in the bill last year. We have emissions goal and targets, a shorter one and a longer one. I'm not going to read this to you. Obviously, you can do that, and we can send you this electronically as well.
Okay.
Environmental justice to make sure those communities that have been disproportionately affected, we understand where those communities are, what the impacts have been, how much money's been invested, and what we should do going forward. And again, much of that was in last year's bill. We also established a Climate Justice Corps about 10 or 12 years ago under the late Senate President Miller. We created a Chesapeake Conservation Corps. This would do the same thing in those communities where there has been environmental injustice and underinvestment. And we'd hire young people under 25 for a year to work in sustainability, environmental justice in impacted communities. I'm really excited about it, actually, to put these people to work. And the Chesapeake Conservation Corps, they have placed at least 30% of the people who go through it in jobs afterwards doing that kind of work, whether it's planting trees, working with nonprofits. We want to have them work at Morgan. There are a lot of programs we're going to do in this. I'm going to come back to buildings because that's, I think, the one you're probably going to be most concerned about. Can we flip, go through? Okay, transportation, like last year, as the state passenger vehicle fleet reaches its life cycle, gets replaced with electric vehicles. The infrastructure bill has money for electrifying school buses. So we say that going forward, all new school buses that are purchased, if they are available and there is federal money, federal or state money, they must start to transition to electric vehicles. We're putting in language to take care of those smaller counties that contract with private bus companies. This was not meant to affect them negatively. So we want this to be a zero cost. And some counties are already doing it. I think Montgomery County is doing it, maybe others as well. Schools, very similar to last year. We want jurisdictions to begin to build net zero schools. Baltimore City, Holabird Academy in East Baltimore just built a school. It is terrific. Our committee visited it. It only cost $3 million additional to make it net carbon neutral. I mean, they are not emitting greenhouse gases. It is very cool. They use heat pumps. They use geothermal, solar, passive. It is great.
And what's the name of that school?
Holabird, East Baltimore, right near the edge of Baltimore City, Baltimore County. I'm looking around to see if any. Yes. Yes, exactly. And there's another one in Wild Lake in Howard County. They have built a net zero school, carbon emissions. It costs a little bit more in terms of marginal cost, but they didn't start from a clean slate. They had sort of a blueprint. But when you start fresh, the costs are not that great because you're saving money. You know, you're not putting in a furnace, you're putting in a heat pump. You don't have to put pipe in, so you actually save money. We'll get back to that in a minute. The next two sections are pretty similar from last year. The Just Transition Work Group to make sure, as we're changing our fuels, that our working families and unions aren't left behind because there are winners and losers. There's more electric. So, for example, IBW will grow, but plumbers and pipe fitters with fewer pipes are going to have a problem. So we get all the stakeholders around the table to figure out how do we take care of those people, retrain them so they can make a good wage and pay their rent, their mortgage, their car payment, college for their kids. And we also say that going forward, the state has to use clean electricity either by transforming their buildings or buying clean. And we give them the next 8 years to start getting in that direction. Next. Okay, Green Bank. And this is something you're familiar with. Actually, your committee is more familiar than my committee. I've been speaking with the MCEC, Clean Energy Center, and they have told me that there's a lot of private investment that they could leverage if they had some money. So I talked with Kathy Magruder. She testified in support of the bill, and we are proposing a $5 million green bank within the MCEC for projects. We're calling it the Climate Catalytic Capital Fund, and the money could be used in investment technology and development, environmental justice to reduce greenhouse gas, electrified transportation, energy management, clean energy generation, weatherization, cutting-edge advanced clean energy technology, et cetera. So we want to give them money to access private investment. And actually, they were in town yesterday. They had a conference over at the Calvert House. So there are a lot of people ready to get into clean technology, and so we'd have this bank within MCEC. Empower, you're very familiar with. It's been at 2%. This ratchets it up to 2.75 over the next 6 years, 5 years. That was also in last year's bill. When we talked last year with Pepco, they were fine with it. I can't remember if we talked to BG&E.
Well, we don't have a lot of time, so
I'm almost,
we only have a half hour.
I'll stop in
So we're just
about,
kind of
give me
getting
one
an
more
overview.
minute. Community solar, obviously that's limited by PSC, and this is for some tax breaks when it's low to moderate income customers. We create a clean energy hub, a couple of people who work as coordinators, traffic cops, to get clean, green architects to develop buildings, to where to go to, but we want to have sort of a center for coordination in the state government. And then we deal with methane release, particularly from landfills. That's it, right? There's the building, I'm going to stop. The buildings is very in-depth and complicated, so I'm going to stop. And on the stuff I talked about, other than buildings, Madam Chair, if
Okay, you got one good question?
Sorry, Tammy. Yeah. Only that, it's a question, but it's also a comment. We have legislation inside of our committee that's dealing with these things, and there might be some crosses and some conflicts of sorts. I know one, for example, dealing with Empower, for sure, and some things that I'm interested in doing, particularly for low-income folks who are negatively have not seen the value of Empower and have some ideas about doing that. How are we going to work through those kinds of things?
then thank you, and it's a good reminder. we either have language in, or we're planning on putting language in, that intent language, this is not meant to prohibit, in fact, I don't know, encourage changes to empower that are already underway. In other words, I know there's a work group, PSC, of really revamping it. We encourage that. We encourage whatever you do on that. The only thing we do with empower is saying, short of any changes, major revamping, if nothing else happens, we want to increase it. But if you do things that supersede it, this is not meant to restrict it. So I encourage whatever you do to revamp, empower, and make it more effective and more expansive, and the PSC, that's your purview. But because we've dealt with wanting to increase empower before we know what any kind of ramp up is, we put this in. But this will be subsumed. But this is really the only thing that in the whole bill on empower. It's really two sentences that say we go from 2% to 2.75, and I don't want to restrict anything you folks are looking at.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Okay, let's go to the big piece. The Climate Commission, that is 25 or 27 people, about 60% are the administration, all the agencies, MDE, transportation, MEA, ag, whatever. And then you've got some scientists, you've got the president of UMCs, you've got labor, you've got builders. They meet regularly. And they've had a mitigation work group, and under that, they've had a building work group under that. In the most recent plan from the Climate Commission, there was a recommendation that was adopted, 22-2 or 23-2, something like that. So essentially, the administration supported it, that says all newly constructed buildings will use electric for heating and hot water rather than oil or natural gas. And they did it after extensive study from a consultant from California, it's called E3, that said, and I'm going to show you the charts in a minute, whether it's commercial, whether it's multifamily, whether it's residential, if you build using electric and not dropping pipes and putting in furnaces, it's cheaper. And obviously, environmentally, as we fulfill what we passed by your leadership on the renewable portfolio standard, as the solar, the wind, the geothermal, all of that increases to 50%, which originated from your committee, all that will come through electric lines. So why build an infrastructure that's outdated and is going to pollute and result in emissions? So essentially, now, there's a question about the date. The bill says 23, the state standards are built, and then the local jurisdictions have another 12 months to review and implement. So it's a 24 date. And I'll be frank with you, some people say it's a little too aggressive. And there are discussions they're underway to see whether it needs a little more time. So that's part one, all new construction. And there is a safety valve. If it would cost more than traditional construction, plus the social cost of the emissions, of cleanup and everything else, there's a waiver, and the counties can say, you get a free pass. So there's language in here where there's a safety valve going forward. And I will tell you that the people representing NIOP and the builders voted in favor of this recommendation 3 months ago in November. The second part is 5 or 10 years from now, new construction is only going to be a small part of a building stock. Most is what's already up. So the question is, they're emitting all this greenhouse gas. How do we start to reduce that? So the bill proposes that large buildings, depending how you use, anything over 25,000 square feet. It's not your home or my home, I don't think. I don't think anybody's got a home. There might be a couple in western Montgomery County that large, but I even doubt that. That any building over 25,000 square feet must be net zero by 2040. So in other words, when they renovate a large building and they make changes to a shell or an office building or commercial, they have to look at adding solar or replacing furnaces with heat pumps or whatever they choose to do, or energy efficiency. And we have a glide path of a 20% reduction, a 40% reduction, to get to the point that even the existing buildings start to do this in a conscious way. 2 points on that. And I use this example, and it's probably overused. The Empire State Building did a renovation. I don't know if it was 40 million or 80 million. I mean, it was the Empire State Building. I mean, they didn't go down to the shell. They got their money back of the extra money they used during the renovation to make it clean energy, to reduce energy consumption and emissions. And they got their return on investment back in a very short time. I'll find out, I don't know if it was 6 years, 7 years, 5 years, but very impressive. Here too, there's a question the builders have raised. Well, how about if we have to renovate to meet this, but it's super expensive? Fair point. We create a task force of all the stakeholders, builders, NIOP, the government, everybody, to come up with a proposal of state tax credits, state support, that if the cost of doing this exceeds a certain number, which they're going to set, to link the retro that makes it reasonable. So in other words, if you can get your money back in 6 years, your investment, and then you start making money by saving money on energy, you know, they don't need any help. But if you make a point, we can't recoup our money, except it's going to take us 15 or 17 years or whatever, this group, this task force, will come up with recommendations to give some assistance. Massachusetts, I believe, has done something very similar, and they're doing pretty well on it. So let's go to the next slide to bring this to some concrete view. Okay, this is going forward, all electric single, and this is from Energy Environmental E3, the group that the administration used. If you go all electric versus the traditional mixed fuel, this is the annual cost in a single family design of a home. It's cheaper by $1,700 a year. And they have no horse in this race. They are a modeling company. So that's for a single family going forward for new construction. Let's go to the next one. This is multifamily, an apartment building. This is their estimate of what the cost would be if the new multifamily construction uses all electric and doesn't lay pipe, use furnaces, et cetera. And again, you see a $1,700 annual savings of cost. Next. And this is a large commercial new construction. Office building, for example, even that, new construction, whether it's 2027, 2030, there's a savings, modest, only $3,000 a year. I don't know if it's I don't know what the unit is. So that's, so this is even without any, you know, supports, but the bill still has a safety valve if it exceeds it significantly. Okay, so that's all going forward, new construction. Now let's talk about.
Let me ask you just one question.
Absolutely.
That Building Energy Transition Task Force, is it assumed that there will be representation from the General Assembly on that? I think it might be a good idea, so somebody's sort of staying up.
Yeah, this is April Morton, our committee counsel, who helped draft the bill.
Okay. Well, you can go on, and if they find out, they can just let us know.
Yeah, there's a member from each body.
Okay.
It's on page 50 of the bill if you have it in front of you.
Okay.
And look, if people have other suggestions, this is a work in progress. This was suggested to us somewhat from the Climate Commission, so we're open to that question, Madam Chair. But again, that group is to talk about any state support for the retrofitting. Going forward, it's, according to the studies, it'll be cheaper. So they will not need state assistance, and there is a safety valve to release them.
Senator Kramer, do you have a burning issue?
That's fine, Madam Chair. I think we're going to go to the next slide where I will have my questions targeted, so
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, this goes to retrofit, right? The ones that already exist. And this is what they project in terms of multifamily for an apartment building, whether it's a garden apartment or a high-rise. They say the annual retrofit customer cost of, I believe, capital and operating is cheaper. So in other words, on this glide path, if in 3 years it's time for you to replace your furnace or replace the windows of this building or whatever, the cost and the savings will ultimately come down on the side of it's a positive, net positive, to move to all electric or to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. And we're not telling them how to do it, Madam Chair. If they want to put solar on the roof and they can do that, that's great. If they want to increase energy efficiency, which hopefully will have them release less greenhouse gas, if they want to go to heat pump, whatever they want to do, we're not telling them how to do it. So that's multifamily. Let me get through the other two slides, Senator, and then we can. Here's this is a commercial, and this is for retrofit. On the left is the traditional. On the right is if you have all electric with a backup, a mixed fuel backup. I assume that'll be gas or electric. I'm sorry, gas or oil, but I assume gas, natural gas. That it's cheaper, even for a commercial retrofit. The middle one is if you don't have the backup, which we're not recommending. So the study done by E3 that the administration paid for shows in every scenario helping the state and the planet reduce its greenhouse gas emissions actually is cheaper by following this path. Let me stop there.
Okay, Senator Kramer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Pinsky, I applaud the concept and appreciate the importance of addressing the climate crisis, as you are well familiar with my having visited your committee on multiple occasions on that very subject. Having said that, I'm still trying to figure out how this retrofit, as opposed to going forward, actually works in practice. And as you may know, many of my committee members know, I am in the world of commercial real estate leasing and management, all commercial. And, you know, I, when possible, when replacing HVAC, work with commercial contractors, and my message to them is always, those units with the greatest efficiency to be brought in. I have been working diligently when it's time to replace a roof, to work with engineers to ensure that when possible and structurally sound, insulation is increased, and in fact, on 3 projects, have increased the insulation by 50% without jeopardizing the steel structure that supports it. Having said all of that, these are buildings that were designed with limited electric based on the transformers supplying the properties, gas for the heating during the winter months, and I'm not sure, A, whether there are commercial grade heat pumps that can handle the scale of a 10,000, 15,000, 5,000 square foot building, space, not building, but space. And can Pepco even provide that kind of electrical service? Because what that would entail would be tearing up parking lots, assuming Pepco could even bring in that amount of electricity to power units, getting away from, and I get it, going forward makes a lot of sense. Going back to buildings that were specifically designed by architects and engineers, in their structure and their design, all the gas plumbing that's running through those buildings, you're literally talking about tearing up parking lots, tearing up buildings, tearing up floors, walls. And so I'm hoping to impress you with the reality of, yeah, I can appreciate, in fact, just did an entire center, tore out all the existing parking lot lighting and put in high-efficiency LED. Huge cost in doing so. But the bottom line is, where it can be done, that's great, but, and I appreciate you've got a safety valve in here that's going to somehow punish those who built under the existing standards at a point in time. And now it's, well, the safety valve is we're going to let you buy your way out of it and spend money to engage in the safety valve. So, you know, I still am a little bit at a loss as to how this actually works in the real world.
Let me clarify one or two things. It's only for buildings over 25,000 square feet.
I understand.
So it's,
And those are going to be the ones hardest to retrofit because of the size and the scale and the design and the structure of a building of that size. You might have a gas pipe that runs the length of a building and then feeds off all of the, you know, different, you know, tenant spaces, you know, each commercial tenant and their retail space. And then, you know, to then bring somehow, if electric scale could function, then you're tearing up all of that. Then you've got to run electric, you've got to heavy up the circuit breakers, the disconnects, I mean, the electrical equipment, the switching gear alone could be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Senator, let me butt in and say one thing. We really scheduled this for only one half
I'm well
hour.
aware, Madam Chair.
No. You're asking great questions. I'm glad that the questions are getting out, and Senator Feldman also has one question. We aren't going to have time to get all of the answers today. We wanted to give the committee a
Thank you,
sense
Madam
of
Chair. I'm well
the
aware of the
parameters.
restraints, but I
But you got some
appreciate
good
that.
questions, and I would invite everybody here with some questions, put them down in writing, and we can get them together, have staff put them in some order and get them to
Okay.
the committee so that.
Senator Pinsky and I can speak offline. Thank you, Madam Chair.
But that was great to hear that. Okay, Senator.
Paul, just two quick questions, very quick. Just on, because a real threshold question that I think has come up. Covered building, okay, the definition of covered building, the question of a commercial building, does that include a nonprofit, a healthcare facility, a place of worship? I'm looking at page 23, lines 29 to 31, kind of unclear and pretty significant, you know, so I just put that out there. And the second question, while you're thinking about that, would be, last year when we had the bill, the issue of the SEEF fund did come up, and you know, we had bills in this committee dealing with SEEF. So on the electric vehicle part of your bill, you are I just want to put it out there, you're tapping the SEEF fund to, or not, or unclear.
okay, that was my next point to
Okay.
cover, so thank you.
Okay, those are my two
If-
questions, Madam
If
Chair.
I could have planted that question, I couldn't have done it any better, Senator.
Okay.
This bill, unlike last year, does not tap the SEEF fund, it does not tap the Bay Restoration Fund. For whether it's the Green Bank or a fund to make schools carbon neutral, whether to pay for the state's fleet, it's going to come from the general fund. We're not touching CEF, we're not touching the BRF. I've been in talks with Budget and Tax in the Senate President's office. Look, I believe,
Why don't we just leave, what about the first question about covered, does that include, because it's unclear, I'll be honest with it,
it's
statutory
unclear, but
language is
we would
totally-
be happy to entertain an amendment.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you, Madam Chair.
And let's just quickly hear one last question for now. Everybody else, if you've got questions, put them down in writing. We'll get them in some order and get them to the.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chairman, for coming in. I was just going to suggest that, obviously, there are a lot of questions, and we don't have the time to go through that today. But there's a whole nother group of stakeholders that, presented or maybe opposed or supported the bill in committee hearing. Would it be appropriate that we set up maybe a briefing from some of the other stakeholders, the utility companies and energy suppliers, to maybe give us some,
Well,
feeling of the bill?
let's do this. Put all of that down and ask that as a question and see what the committee that has prime jurisdiction over this thinks, given the way they are working it. We don't know what their work plan is
Yeah.
yet.
We understand.
Madam Chair, we had 60 witnesses, 4 hours and 45 minutes. We can make the testimony from everybody available to you. Look, to be clear, we had a lot of groups and organizations supporting it. There are a couple that weren't super happy, but we're actually having conversations with some of them to try to work with some of the stakeholders. But I'll be frank, ladies and gentlemen, Pepco and BG&E came out against it. They also sell gas. I asked BG&E, what does the G stand for? And I can tell you this, the Vice President for Government Relations for Pepco is co-chair of the Climate Commission. And I think it was November, she voted in favor of this generally, not exactly the same, this building proposal. They came in front of us Tuesday, and another person came in and said they oppose it. And I asked the lobbyist, I said, what's going on? In front of the Climate Commission, their Vice President of Government Relations voted in favor of this, and I didn't want to put it under the bus. And then they come out when it's a real bill, and all of a sudden they say, well, and BG&E said, we want to have a mix, we want to have customer choice. And they are intractable at the moment. And we've had some conversation, and I can tell you BG&E said, this is new to us, we've only had it for 2 weeks. This has been debated in the Climate Commission for 1.5 years. That have been open meetings, they've known about it. But they're not real excited. I'm having conversations with NIOP and the construction folks. We've had one meeting, we're going to have another next week, and we're trying to see if there's some common ground. So it is a work in progress. The testimony from all 60 witnesses is available if people would like to see it.
Okay. I think right at this point, Chairman Penske and I will do it another meeting, but
point, I think it would
Okay.
be great to
You'll be our last.
get opportunity to hear from other people. Some of us, we know where some of us are on different issues, but there's a lot in this, and I think it's fair to ask questions. I mean, BG&E and Pepco may say one thing or another in a hearing, but if they've said that the electric grid can't quite take all of this, I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask and try to drill down on it. I saw some of the hearing testimony, so.
Okay.
I mean, it's fair that they have some questions. They are claiming that there's problems with the electric grid handling it. I mean,
all right, what I would suggest is that we accept the offer from Chairman Penske and his staff to get us back the testimony that they have in their possession based on all that they have, and that we read and that we give it a few days, and then we know better what questions we need to ask and what to listen for. Obviously, it isn't the same as if we were on this, we aren't actually, or if we were the lead committee, which we're not. But even when they come to the floor with whatever their product is, with your having read what has gone on and what they have received from entities that have an interest in the issue, I think we'll be better able to know. I'm going to call on our vice chair for one last quick comment, and then
Not
we'll-
on this bill. After we're done here, I just want
Oh,
to
okay.
30 seconds for the committee
All
about
right, we
something
want to
else.
thank you
Thank you.
and the staff, and we appreciate you getting back to us with the materials as soon as you can. And thanks so much, colleagues.
Okay,
Okay.
Very quickly, so yesterday, one of the bill hearings, was not as precise about something I said. I always like to correct the record. So I did say that local health officers were required to be MDs. So I did pull the actual statute, just to be very, very clear. The local health officer does not have to be an MD if, only if, there's a deputy who is a physician, number one. And secondly, but having said that, that same health officer still has to have a master's degree in public health and at least 2 years' work in the field of public health, or shall have at least 5 years' work in the field of public health, sort of mirroring the bill we passed yesterday. So I just want to be clear, you did call me out and you were accurate, and I never want to leave any loose ends with the committee, so that, and I have the statute here. I'm going to give you 3 people that voted against the bill. I have 3 copies of the statute. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I want to thank all of you for being here, and especially those of you who raised some of your issues and questions this morning. But we'll take a look at what they have in all of their written testimony that they have received. And then we can decide if there are 3 or 4 of you that want a small work group with a.
Hershey? Let's put
with it, well, let's wait and see what we get back, and then we'll decide who's really interested in being on the work. Well, we don't know even what we want to have yet, but we're all open.